Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Lenten Journey, Companions Along the Way. I'm Patty Ames, Canon for Christian Formation. We appreciate you all being with us as we continue our journey through Lent. As has been our custom, we begin with a moment of silence and then a poem to help us focus on our Lenten journey. So I invite you now to take a deep breath and let it go, and take a moment to still ourselves before we begin. A Listening by Anne Weems from her book, Kneeling in Jerusalem. Going through Lent is a listening. When we listen to the word, we hear we are so blatantly unliving. If we listen to the word and hallow it into our lives, we hear how we can so abundantly live again. Tonight, we have the privilege and pleasure of being joined by Martha Bourlakas. Martha is a mom of 3 grown daughters, a wife, and disability advocate. Martha is also an author, entrepreneur, and owner of Storied Goods. She travels the world with tins of her Storied Goods sugar cubes and bottles of champagne to create celebrations of joy. She is a speaker, a lover of dogs, and my favorite, yellow cake with chocolate icing. Martha and I have not known each other as long as some of my other guests, but I value her words and wisdom, and am blessed to have her as a companion on my spiritual journey. Martha, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Patty. Excuse me. I'm so glad to be here. And thank you all for taking your precious nighttime to spend with us. It's great to be here.
So Martha, as we begin, I've asked our guests just to tell us some about your life narrative and your spiritual journey.
Oh, that's a big question, Patty. Patty prepared me for all this, but I don't know if I'm prepared for all this. I grew up in East Tennessee, and I grew up in the Presbyterian church. And my father was Presbyterian. My mother played the organ at the Presbyterian church. And so I grew up there. I went to high school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I spent a lot of time in the Moravian church there, the Moravian tradition. And then my mom took the job right across the street in our hometown as the Episcopal organist. And so my dad soon followed her, and I met Mark at Sewanee. And so before we knew it, we all became Episcopalian, and my brother converted. And so that's been our church journey along the way, and with lots of spiritual twists and turns all within that, and learning from each tradition what I felt was life-giving and what I felt was not. And all that became really clear through this zigzag journey. And Mark and I moved 13 times in our marriage, all with different churches and jobs. So it's been a path. It has.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in all those moves, were there things that struck you as you reflect back now on your spiritual journey as kind of milestone markers?
There were a lot of milestone markers. I think definitely when the Episcopal Church welcomed in my whole family in a way. My dad was mayor of our hometown, and it was a small town, so that came with that was a lot of emotional charge, a lot of people very invested in what our family did and what our family didn't do. And he found, Dad experienced during a particular race, he was mayor several terms, that he felt the support at the Episcopal Church, and the people there just really lifted him up and wrapped their arms around him, and were taking care of my mom, and emotionally and spiritually. And that just spoke volumes to me. I had never really seen that. My experience in the Presbyterian church was more of a very staid, very everything keeps quiet, there's no emotion, that kind of thing. So I remember that first sort of switch and recognition that church can be an emotional landing place. And that was huge for me. The same thing happened when I met Mark in Sewanee. He was, he loved carrying the cross every Sunday, or not every Sunday at Sewanee, but a lot of Sundays. And that just struck me. I had never really met anybody my age who wanted to be in church, who wanted to be in a spiritual space. I had lots of Baptist friends growing up, and they always wanted for me to get saved and baptized again, because obviously the first one didn't count. And other than that, I had friends who didn't want to go to church, and who just weren't involved, or kind of rolled their eyes. And I certainly did that along with my brother. We were eye rollers. And then I met Mark, and it seemed like he was energized by it. And he loved it. And then he was also a smart, funny person. And so I loved that kind of marriage of the spiritual life and culture. He was interested in art and sports and all that. So I loved that. It was the first time I had really experienced that. And I loved it. And let's see. Mom and Dad are on this Zoom call. I'll look at them for cues of these spiritual milestones. Definitely when we got to seminary, that was a huge milestone. To go to seminary is it's a sacrifice. You really change your life. And Hannah was a newborn pretty much when we made the decision to go. Sarah was born in seminary. And when we were in seminary was when Hannah was diagnosed with autism. And she had several disabilities at that point. And she was diagnosed there, and started physical therapy there, and started speech therapy. And again, the spiritual community of seminary and those people there met us in that it was a very dark place. It felt very difficult and very hard. We had been living close to my family, and we moved way up to Chicago, where it was still cold, and we lived in a cinder block apartment, and it was just stark. It was stark. But I still, the feeling of going in the place where we all eat together, and just the warmth of that, both metaphorical and literal warmth, was so comforting. And again, the Holy Spirit met us right in that place. And so then, I those times of birth, Sarah's birth, Elizabeth's birth, all of that, those were all such spiritual milestones in our journey. And there continue to be these milestones.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing those.
Yeah, thank
you.
And
it's good to hear, because I think when we think about our spiritual journey, we tend to focus on those positive times, or those mountain highs, if you will. And, for me at least, and hearing you speak, there are also those times where it's kind of the desert, but we learn there too, and feel the presence of the Holy Spirit working on our lives.
We do, Patty, and I appreciate your saying that, because probably for me, those times have been the most profound, and I'm particularly attuned to that because I feel like in our culture and the way religion and church is painted is that if you are not experiencing God and the Holy Spirit in that moment, which we do obviously in times of joy, but I think that what a lot of people hear is that if you have the sense that God is not there in those moments, that you are not experiencing the fullness of God. And I just believe that that's really where I've had my most profound moments, and where I continue to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason in the opening slide, that's a picture from my pilgrimage to the Holy Land that I took 4 years ago now.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And I know Bishop Mark is getting ready to make his way back home after being on his pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And for me, the physical being in the desert and and those people walking with me, but the desert was one of the most profound sights, and that stillness, and it just spoke volumes to me about how important that is, and that we do kind of go through those desert times, but we're not alone, and we come out of the desert as well.
I love that, Patty. I can't wait for you and Mark to share your desert journey stories, because I do think for someone who hasn't experienced that, we've FaceTimed a lot while he's been gone, and I feel like it's just so strange. I feel like it's hard for him to communicate what the experience is like, and how profound that is.
Yeah. And all our experiences, and whether we are actually going to the Holy Land or wherever we experience God and other people, the Christ in others. And, what I feel like is your voice, you have found your voice and use it in such a positive way in many different ways, but your books in particular. And I would love for you to talk about that, of finding your voice, writing your 2 books, and I'll put those in the chat while you talk, and we'll send those titles out tomorrow in our follow-up email. But they both have different but profound, I think, meanings and stories that you share. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Thank you, Patty. This is like Martha's book sale. Yay! 20% off for all who participate. I'm just kidding. Yes, I got my MFA in creative nonfiction in 2012 when we were living in Louisville, when Mark was at the cathedral. And so my thesis was on what it's like to raise a child and be raised by a child with disabilities in a family of faith and in a clergy family. And I thought that all that whole experience just spoke to so many parts of our family's journey and the religious journey and all that. So I started writing essays long ago when Hannah was first diagnosed, and then that became my thesis, and so that thesis is the book that became Love Feast. And the reference is the Moravian Love Feast, where you come together in church, and it's in addition to the Eucharist. And it is a very sweet mug of coffee and a very sweet bun that you get served in church, and you share this together. And the first time my dad came to the Moravian church in Winston-Salem, and we went together, Dad, it very much believes that you finish everything you're given on your plate. And so we're in the Moravian church, and they're passing out these buns and this coffee. And he didn't realize that what most everybody does, take a little sip of coffee, little bite of the bun, and then kind of cram it back in and go on with church. And Dad's like, what? This is delicious. I want to drink all this coffee, eat all this bun. And that experience, the experience of first being there with my dad, the experience of the sweetness in church, and when the love feast happens, you talk to your neighbors. Patty, how you doing? It's kind of like an extended piece. And I thought it was just such a lovely, warm metaphor for everyone being at the table, even beyond and in addition to the Eucharist. And it's very profound for me in light of Hannah's disabilities and how many times she has been excluded from tables, how many times I have felt excluded from tables because of her disabilities, and how many other people in the world experience that just moment by moment. And so that love feast and everybody coming to the table was the theme that holds all these essays together of my imperfections as a mom, my imperfections as a human, and then at the same time, my perfection as a beloved child of God, Hannah's perfection, everybody's. I just loved that. And so that drove that whole book. My second book, which is called Our One Word, when we first came to this diocese, I started a group, and some of you might have been a part. We started out coming to Diocesan House, and every week we would pick a word, and we would have, coffee together or wine together, whatever you wanted, had a little snack, and just talked about that word and how that word was active in our lives for that week. And we did a small activity, we did a small prayer, and it was just a great way to get to know some women in the diocese and to bring women together. And so I started traveling. People started asking for it. And so I traveled within the diocese and then also outside of the diocese. And it was a great experience. And so I turned that into a book so that, just lost my AirPod, so that anybody in the diocese could, or anywhere, could use it as a resource. So yeah, it was great. It's been great.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that about
Sure.
those books and that process.
Yes.
Is there a word right now that's on your mind later? As you've been on these, I'm going to ask you for some other words. But is there one word right now that you seem focused on, or that's in your heart or soul?
There's so many words, and I was thinking, I've thought about this since you and I first talked a couple of weeks ago about this. And then yesterday Nashville happened, and so the word shifted for me, and I have felt such great sorrow again. I loved in the poem, I loved that poem that you read in the beginning. And I love the word abundant and abundance. And that word, to have abundance, the abundant love of God, the abundant love we all have access to share, existing together with that sorrow is what has really struck me today.
Yeah.
And where to find that abundance in the world, and how to infuse this world with abundant love. That's really what I have prayed about today and tried to live with. Where do we find it in such unspeakable desperation that obviously exists? Well, how do we infuse abundant love into that?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It has been, and it's been on my heart and mind as well. But that same thought process of, how can we share love so that more people can feel that, and not that despair or hate or whatever it might be going on in someone.
Right.
So, thank you.
I have turned before to Gregory Boyle, and some of you might know Father Gregory Boyle. He wrote Tattoos on the Heart and several books he's written. And he is a Jesuit priest who started a huge operation called Homeboy Industries out in Los Angeles. And so he works every moment with people who have been in gangs, and he has, created jobs and lives for these people. And so violence is a part of his everyday experience. And so he's a really helpful person to read in these times right now. But he was talking about always receiving people for who they are, always receiving the pain, not trying to heal or correct or change, but receiving people where they are and offering back abundant love and joy. He talks a lot about joy, and that is helpful to me because I sometimes go through my life with things we've gone through, with socio-political things, and I think we have no right to have joy or to talk about joy or to experience joy within this. And as he says, that's what's most needed right now. It's not to forget what the pain that anybody is experiencing, but to bring that joy and acknowledge the joy that can be this world and the people who walk with us. And, I just think that's critical. So reading about joy today seemed both strange and necessary. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the ways you share joy now is this business that you have. And I would love if you would take a little time to talk about Storied Goods, about how it came about. And you and I were talking about some of the quotes that you have on your website, and just how important that is, that joy and that celebrating. And I'm just going to let you tell us about how that came about.
Okay. Patty Markle. We don't want Mark to catch wind that I was like hawking
Yeah, we're not
sugar
here to put, yeah,
cubes.
this is all part of your story.
Time here. Yeah. It's my business is called Storied Goods, and I sell infused sugar cubes for cocktails, for coffee, for tea. And it started out as a gift. I was making these as gifts for people, and then it just kind of caught on and turned into a business, which it now is, and I really love it. And the reason I called this business Storied Goods goes back to Love Feast. I believe that there are many stories that we tell ourselves about the people we are, the people God thinks we are, that are not necessarily helpful stories, and about the ways we should be or things we should be doing or how we have to act and be. I think the real truth is that the story that matters is that we're beloved, and we have an honor and a privilege to share our stories with each other. And like you said before, to see that Christ in each other. And I love food and drink. I love to bake. I love to share food. I think the table is where our stories happen. And I think that's how we connect with each other. I love the leveling of the table. And because all people are equal at the table, those stories are shared equally and powerfully. And it makes us listen to each other. And so I am very, very committed to the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell within our families, and the stories we hear from each other. And that goes to what Father Boyle is saying about receiving each other. That's the way to receive each other, I think. And I also think celebrations are critical right now. And I think that, again, as Hannah, as we've raised Hannah, and Hannah has raised us, and she's raised my parents, she's raised all of us in such a way that with Hannah, every milestone was delayed. So every milestone was very, very celebrated. And I have learned through her that the smallest things, our smallest accomplishments, deserve to be celebrated. And I think we spend a lot of time telling ourselves the ways we have done wrong in the world, or the ways we need to do better, or I should have done this or should have done that. And so I think there's a lot of value in just stopping and saying, I took a shower today. It was pretty amazing. I took a shower and walked Lucy today. And that's a pretty big deal some days. And I think it's important that we communicate that to people.
I so agree. I think it's important to recognize the holy and the ordinary, and celebrate that.
Yeah.
And realize we don't need to wait for some large event to happen,
Right.
or holiday or holy day. But to celebrate life, I think is what we're called to do. And sadly, we see that in the midst of other things going on, how precious life is, and to celebrate.
It's true.
Moments.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, Patty. Yeah.
You've talked a lot about your journey and different parts of it, and some of this in people that have been in your lives, whether it was when you and Bishop Mark were at seminary, and your parents being such an important part. Are there other people that have walked with you on your spiritual journey, and who do you walk with on your journey?
Anne Lamott, I read Anne Lamott for the 19th time today. I think there's so many authors read and reread. In a life, when you move a lot, and some of you might know this experience, but when you move a lot, your group, your friends, and the people who are in your life change, and you get to find people in each community. And so there are people in every community where we've lived, almost every community, that still walk with me. And those people, the authors that I love, I just now said that, our three daughters. I remember the first time when Mark was talking to me about when he started way back going to monasteries for spiritual retreats. And then I'm pretty sure I was complaining that I had never really done a spiritual retreat. And we changed that. But in that discussion, I remember talking about the family, or the family unit, whatever your family looks like, whether it's you and your dog, or whatever, you and your partner, the family unit as being a monastic kind of cell. And that has always just spoken to me so strongly. And I have thought, if I can take care of this cell today, then I'm doing good spiritual work. And I find when the cell takes care of me, then it's just so nourishing. And so Mark and I do a lot of intentional work on the cell, because we really believe that work is the work that enables us and enables them to go out into the world and be healthy and spiritual and highly functioning.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of our of the people who walk with me, is this cell. And Lucy and Walter.
Yes. Your dogs, just so people know who
Yes.
Lucy and Walter are.
Yes, Patty knows.
Well, that makes me think of this question. So you now have 3 adult daughters. How has that journey and that companionship along the way in the spiritual journey changed for you as your daughters are now young adults, from the time when you were walking with them as children compared to now?
Yeah, that's a good question, Patty. I think about it a lot, because I have found that for me at this point, there is a lot of hands up kind of release and receiving of their spiritual wisdom. And it's exciting. And it's so different. I think of all the years I dragged them to Sunday school and church. And I do mean dragged sometimes. There were days. And I can see little Elizabeth was always very muddy, and she always wore these muddy flip-flops to church and all that. And then, she just called the other day and said, I got asked to be a leader at Canuga for one of the summer programs. And I thought, there's Muddy Elizabeth. She's going to be in the mud at Canuga. And then Sarah has her own, her partner is Jewish, and the tradition that she's exposed to there. And then Hannah, who so many of you know, and how active she is in her church in Fairfax. That richness just teaches me. That part to me is just so thrilling. Not that they do any one thing, but the ways that they express their spirituality and the ways they communicate it back to me is just rich. It's so rich.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
It is interesting, whether it's family or friends that walk with us, and especially over time, how those can change, but they're still walking with us.
Yes. Oh, yes. I think that's the big part of it is that change, is sort of accepting that and moving with that change that's necessary when you move as much as we have.
Yeah.
And that's its own kind of gift.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
So as we're moving our way through Lent and headed towards Holy Week, what has your Lenten journey been like this year? And are there any certain practices that you have been doing for yourself? A focus. So you talked about authors that speak to you, things you're reading or listening to. Anything along those lines on your Lenten journey this year?
I am. So the Gregory Boyle has been. That's been a big part of this journey. I go back to him over and over. And so that's been a big part. I have really worked on gratitude this Lent, and it the gratitude list can sound so trite, and it's just not. It's really something I've worked very hard on through actually before this Lent, and just kept going every single night. I do meditate. I try to meditate at least 4 times a week. And I've really tried to keep that up during Lent. I have taken on Pilates and pretty proud of that. And so I think for me, the biggest thing has been showing up for myself, and not seeing that or not experiencing that as something selfish, but experiencing that as something necessary, again, as a beloved child of God. That's been my focus this Lent. How do I show up for myself so that I can show up for the people I love? And that has not always been the case for me. And doesn't work well for anybody. And I don't think that's what God wants me to do.
I so appreciate you saying that, because sometimes people, or I will use myself, when I'm trying to do some self-care, then I'm like, well, that's selfish. I should be doing something else, or that kind of thing. And I think it takes practice, and it's not always easy, at least for some of us, to care for ourselves. But it's so important, and that's what God wants us to do, as you said, because we can't take care of others or walk with others on their journey and our journey if we're not taking care and tending to ourselves.
Right. And tending to ourselves physically and spiritually, emotionally, all of that. Yeah.
In baptism, it makes me think I would do baptism training with parents or preparation, and with one of the priests in my previous church. And I would always, our last session was about after baptism, and realizing that it's a lifelong journey. We're baptized for life, but parents have to continue their spiritual journey so they can walk with their kids. And I would always liken it to going on, I'm probably thinking of this because I'm getting on an airplane tomorrow, but getting on an airplane and what the instructions are, put your oxygen mask on first.
Yes.
And help the child or person beside you, that it's okay to take care and tend to our own spiritual needs as well. And what we're called to do.
I think it is what we're called to do. I think we're called to be whole. And
Jesus did that. I mean, that's our example. Not always
that's right.
When he tried to get away and go pray.
Right.
Disciples were following, but it's important that we do that. So
it is.
Thank you so much for naming that, and claiming that for yourself. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
As we're coming down, are there other things that you think about on your spiritual journey, or those people that have walked with you? Any other things that strike you about your spiritual journey, whether it's during Lent or not? And those people that have been there for you?
Let's see. What do I want to say about this? Yeah, this journey, I think, has taught me so much about the church as it is right now, and how I listen so much to our talking about what the church is now, and how do we get young people to go back, and I hear all the questions, and part of being married to the bishop is seeing, for lack of a better word, the underbelly of the church, of a lot of things. So that particular experience has, I think, opened my mind, and I hope my spirit to what the church is, and how many opportunities there are to be creative and see things in a new way. And I think right now, where we are in the world, and hearing people talk about the church, and seeing it through Mark's eyes, which I do, is just praying for the creativity and the openness for what church is, and not to be afraid.
Mhm.
I think the so much of the pandemic, and where we've been, has not only instilled fear in people just for their physical safety and their health and all that, but there is just so much spiritual fear about what's going to happen in the world, and what are people doing. And and again, I think, sort of like I was talking about doing in the cell of our family, is a lot of just releasing and receiving and praying for creativity and openness, and lack of fear. I don't really see any other way to move forward, in a walk with God, in a
Yeah.
spiritual walk. I don't see any other way than that. And so I think right now that's sort of what's driving me, is to seek those ways of being creative, spiritually speaking, and being open, and not being without fear, but moving ahead with fear,
Mhm.
and being open to the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. You know, um, Holy Spirit is my driver.
Yeah,
And I think doing that, and as you were saying that, and not fearing, um, are we really walking in faith? Do we, I'm going back to that poem, do we hear the word and just hear the word, or do we hear the word and hallow that word in our lives,
right,
to
right.
move
Yeah,
forward? Um,
right.
and it's not always easy, to be sure, but um, I think we let whatever win if we live in fear. Whether it's someone else that is causing us to fear, or whatever it may be. But that's great.
Right. Yeah, I think so too, Patty. I really do. Yeah. And that is a tough journey. It's not easy. But I think that's therein lies Easter,
Yeah, exactly.
over
It
and
is
over
a
and
hard
over.
journey.
Yeah.
Anne Weems, who writes this book, is one of my
Yeah.
favorite poets, and she writes
Beautiful.
a poem that I will use next week, but it's between the two parades. And in talking about how we just want to go from Palm Sunday to Easter, and you can't, you have to go through those difficult times, and we all do in our lives,
Right.
to get to that resurrection and that joy, and that celebration. But it's not a straight path, as we've talked about over the week,
No.
about this spiritual journey. And thank goodness we have people to walk with us.
Thank
Um,
goodness is right. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
um,
Definitely.
as we've talked about, some of your words and your book are one word, but as we're coming to a close, I'm going to invite you, and I've let Martha know about this, as I have our other guests, but 5 words. You may just have one. You talked about a couple, but 5 words that describe your faith journey.
Yeah, Patty, I think we're 3 down. I don't know. Um, I think love, abundance, spirit, and I don't know if Holy Spirit is that 1 or 2, joy, and resurrection. I think just sort of to go with what you're saying, I think there are some days that feel like you have those two ends in one day. You'll have the resurrection happens over here when you start, and again, maybe it's just the shower and the dog walk in between.
Yeah.
But there's some kind of transformation. And so those are the defining words that move me forward. They're words of hope and words of abundance that are just so powerful for keeping us going.
Yeah. I've been making my 5 words a sentence each week, or a phrase.
Yeah, Patty,
And
that's an
so-
overachiever move.
I know. Yeah. But, so mine this week is, as we close with our guest, is companions along the way. Thanks.
Love it.
It's just, like I said, at least for me, I couldn't do this if I wasn't walking with others. And it's such a blessing having you with us tonight, and others that have joined us, but to share your stories and as we all walk together.
It has been a blessing being with all of you. And again, I'm so grateful. Time is valuable, and for you to take this time with us means a lot. So I'm grateful.
So my next question is, and this, I love this one. What's your favorite church word?
Oh, Patty. I have to say my favorite church word is hymn, HYMN. As I said before, my mom is a church organist, and so I grew up hearing her play the piano. I mean, nobody plays a hymn like she does. And we've lived apart for, I don't know, Mom, probably the last 50 years. It feels like we've lived apart. And now we're finally living in the same community. And to be able to sit with her and sing hymns is just, it's like bringing the best of childhood forward, and the emotion, and I feel like we're calling in my grandmother and that. So it's just so powerful for me right now.
That's awesome. All right. So I'm going to throw in an extra question that just,
no.
I know this one may be hard, but what's your favorite hymn?
Oh gosh. Mom's like, don't fail me now. I mean, our wedding hymn was Love Divine, All Love's Excelling. And I don't know, that's like top 10 most popular Anglican hymns, but it's a good one.
It is. Excellent choice.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good for that curveball.
I would think.
What's yours, Patty?
Today, so I've been picking different words. Today, I think because of what's transpired in the past 24 hours, maybe a little longer, has been pray or prayer.
Yes.
And I try, I guess, not always successfully, but pray without ceasing, and even in the midst of typing an email today or whatever it is, prayers for folks in Nashville, and that community. So that's been
yes
my word today.
That's the necessary. Yeah.
So you mentioned Annie Lamott earlier, who has a book, Help Thanks Wow, and the boys at Boys Home use that prayer. And so when I was with them on Ash Wednesday, they were telling me about that, and I thought, oh well, that's a great way to ask our guest. And I would invite you all too, if you want to use the chat to share that. And so we'll start with thanks. What do you want to say thanks for?
There's so much. The gratitude list is long today. I will, for this diocese, for the support this diocese has given and does give our family. It's just an enormous gift. And I feel it today, I think, as Mark is coming home. And I really, yeah, I'm really grateful.
I'm going to say thanks for stories, and the importance of stories and sharing those stories with others. It's powerful. So help.
I help these poor children who have to go to school with these the adults that are not taking care of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My help is help me know what I can do. You talked a little bit about this earlier, but what more can I do so that children don't fear?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
What's your wow today?
Wow, today is tulips. All of a sudden, the tulips they were just everywhere downtown. And it was just sudden. It was sudden and beautiful.
I'm trying to think. My wow, probably the same. I love nature and the color. I was working in Roanoke today in the drive both back and forth to Lynchburg where I live. Just the different colors on that drive. There are a lot of purple. I'm not really good with trees, but there are a lot of purple blossoms of something that are out, and I just love that. And the color,
Yes.
even when it's gray, there's color in this world and brightness. So thank you so much for sharing your Thanks Help Wow, your story,
Thank you for
your spiritual
asking.
journey. And I want to let people know I will send a follow-up email either later tonight or tomorrow morning out with some of the things that Martha has talked about, these authors and other information, her books, for you all. And Hannah's on. I love that, at least part of your cell, your parents and Hannah are on.
I love my
glad that they are
mom and dad and Hannah. I'll send you your checks. Will be coming in the mail. My paid supporters.
I know. I didn't tell them they had to get on, by the way. I just but that's, that's a testament to you and to them and how you all walk together. And I am grateful for that. And we'll end next week. I will be leading a journey, and if Bishop Mark wants to jump in, I will let him. He's probably will be exhausted still, but going through Holy Week using pictures from my pilgrimage along with poetry and some music from Susan Carroll nice. As a meditation in Tuesday and Holy Week to lead us through those holy days and help us walk with Jesus. Not only does Jesus walk with us, but we're called to walk with Jesus, especially through those events of Holy Week. And so I hope you all will join us next week. But before we end, I've asked Martha, as I have with our other guests, to close us in prayer.
Okay, Patty, this is a little bit of it's a kind of an interactive prayer that, again, going back to Father Boyle, I thought using this Ignatian method of prayer would be really helpful for us tonight. And so it's a little bit longer, but I'll tell you how it's going to go. Don't roll your eyes at me. It begins with a thanksgiving, then goes to a petition, then goes to what's called a review, a response, and then a look ahead. And so I'm going to read the various parts of it, and I'll give a little space for your own contemplation. Let us pray. Thanksgiving. What am I especially grateful for in the past day? Is it the gift of another day? The love and support I have received? The courage I have mustered? An event that took place today? The petition. I am about to review my day. I ask for the light to know God and to know myself as God sees me. The review. Where have I felt true joy today? What has troubled me today? What has challenged me today? Where and when did I pause today? Have I noticed God's presence in any of this? Response. In light of my review, what is my response to the God of my life? I look ahead. As I look ahead, what comes to mind? With what spirit do I want to enter tomorrow? Amen.
Amen. Martha, thank you so much. And thank all of you for being with us this evening. I appreciate the gift of your presence and invite you to come back next week as we begin our walk through Holy Week. Until then, everyone have a blessed evening. Good night.